Hello and welcome back to another Warcraft video. So today I'm going to be having a look at a very cool dungeon. This is Everbloom. It's located in Gorgrond, however it finishes in Stormwind, interestingly enough, and it's just kind of involving that big lush area, and I'm pretty sure that it sort of cuts off the storyline with the Nibblers and the Genosaurs and all that stuff. It really is a cool instance though. So the very first boss is this big ancient dude called Withered Bark. Now he starts at 100 energy. And what happens is that he attacks you until he has 0 energy. And once he has 0 energy, well, he gets a bit tired, he has a bit of a sleep. But when he sleeps, because he's got no energy, he gets his debuff called Withered Bark. That increases all damage dealt to him by 100%, which is, of course, a lovely thing. Now, also during the fight, while you're fighting him, he spawns these things on the floor, these vine things, and these circles which will silence you, so don't stand in those. I'll talk about them in a bit, though. So when he gets to 0 health and you're doing the 100% extra damage, these aqueous globules will spawn around the edges of the room at the water. Now these will travel towards the boss, which is a bad thing for us, because whenever they hit the boss, they will give him 25 energy, and when he gets back to 100 energy, he will be fully activated. Now, these don't have much health, but the spawn rate of them will increase until you eventually get overwhelmed, so what you have to do is balance DPSing the boss to destroying the blobs, because obviously if you just focused on the blobs, well fine, he would have Withered Bark and his 100% extra damage taken for longer, but since you wouldn't be attacking the boss, you wouldn't really be making use of it, would you? Now the other thing that goes on is that if those aqueous globules actually hit the vines, they will turn into an ad. The ads are not too scary, they have I think 134,000 health, so they're easy enough to kill. Anyway, in terms of the other things, he does unchecked growth, which is the vines. That just hurts quite a bit, so you don't want to be hit by it, and I think it sucks you up and stuns you or something. So that's a fun thing. And then he also does a frontal cone, which isn't very nice, and then a thing called Parched Grasp, which is the AoE that silences people that I talked about earlier. Overall, Withered Bark is a really fun fight, and it fits the 5-player format really well. Okay, so the next boss is the Ancient Protectors. Now this is actually a small council fight, and there are 3 bosses. The ones that matter the most, though, are the first 2. So the first boss does a simple nuke, a heal, and then a buff, which will buff up one of his allies. These are all interruptible. The second boss does a nuke, he also puts down a slowing void zone, and then finally he does a buff called Briarskin, which will reduce damage dealt to one of his allies by 75%, and then it also does damage to players. All of his abilities are also interruptible. So what you're going to find here is that, yeah, you could interrupt their simple nukes, but there's no point. What you want to do is interrupt the heals and the buffs, and if you do that well, then this should not be a very hard fight. Now the third boss isn't too bad. Basically what he'll do is he'll charge towards players, knock them back, the usual affair. He then also does a thing where he'll grapple you in, and then instantly do a frontal cone attack. So as soon as he grapples you, you just want to run away from that. And now the bosses have a shared health pool, and all you really need to do is just be sure that you interrupt their buffs and then the heal that one of the bosses does. Other than that, I suppose just keep them stacked up for the AoE damage, obviously, because it's a shared health pool, but you have 3 targets, so I guess this is something that the Shadow Priests will like a lot. Anyway, fun fight actually, I really did enjoy it, and again, it's something that's well designed for the 5-player format in terms of its complexity. Okay, so right after the Ancient Protectors, we have got the Spider Boss. Now this isn't actually required, it's an optional boss, maybe that's because it's a bit harder or something, but essentially it's a 2-phase fight. In phase 1 she spawns a whole bunch of ads. Now these ads really are not much of a problem. You've got one kind of spider which I think spits stuff, you've got one which will follow you, and then one which is just kind of a regular damagey enemy dude. They're all fine, the spiders. So you, I think it's 8 waves of those spiders, and then it'll force her into phase 2. Now during phase 1 she is supposed to kind of hang down from the roof, then go back up, then hang down again. However, for some reason she basically just stayed up, or stayed down for us even, so that didn't really happen. A whole bunch of pale orc ads also spawn. Well, by whole bunch I mean one every 30 seconds or so. They don't do a terrible amount of damage, but they actually are involved with the next phase. So in the next phase of the fight, you deal with the boss herself, and honestly, she's not very hard at all. She doesn't actually have that much health. However, what she does do is, again, she summons ads, and also there's some interaction with those orcs. So in terms of her, like her actual things that she does, she's got Toxic Bolt, which is an interruptible nuke that does some nature damage. It's fine. She also does Venom Sting, which will just sting a player, which puts a dot on them that ticks every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. Then she also does a thing called Gaseous Volley. This will basically cause her to spew out some of her blood, and this will form 2 missiles, which will sort of, fly into people. Obviously, so you don't want to stand in the void zones that get caused by those missiles. Again, not very hard. However, the thing that is a bit more annoying is Consume. Now, what she does for this is she will eat one of the Pale Orc ads, and if she is successful, she'll heal for 25% of her max health. So what you need to do is either, well, ideally you want to kill those orcs before she can consume them. However, we found that was very hard to do. Maybe it was just our group's DPS or something like that. But what ended up working, sort of, was kiting the ads away. And that seemed to do the trick, I think. But anyway, overall, the boss is fun enough. I don't really get why it's a bonus boss. Honestly, it feels like it could just fit in as a regular boss. However, it's pretty fun, so hurrah for that, I suppose. Okay, so the next boss is actually, again, a really cool boss. It's Archmage Soul. So she's a mage, and that means she has access to Frost, Fire, and Arcane. Now, she will start off in Fire, and then she'll move to Frost, then she'll move to Arcane. And in each of these schools of magic, she's got 2 abilities. A sort of pretty weak nuke, so Fireball, or Frostbolt, or Arcane Burst, and then she also has a very powerful ability. I'll talk more about those in a bit. Now, there's also a thing called Parasitic Growth. Now, this will happen, and basically it's a cast that can be interrupted, and if she successfully casts it, then she increases her casting speed and damage dealt by 50%. That makes her nukes, just the little not that scary ones, very scary. So what you want to do is interrupt this. However, when you interrupt it, it will swap her over to the next school of magic, which is a fun thing, I suppose. Now, when you do force her to change her school of magic by interrupting Parasitic Growth, she does get Parasitic Infection, which is a stacking thing that increases her damage dealt by her casted spells by 50%. So, again, this fight does get harder over time, especially with the Arcane phase. Anyway, let's talk about the actual phases. So, when she's casting fire magic, she does Fireball. Guess what? It's a Fireball, you don't really care about it. It can be interrupted, though, so I suppose you could do that. But ultimately, you just want to be sure that you interrupt Parasitic Growth. Her dangerous ability is Everbloom. Now, she'll put these fire seeds around the room, and basically a circular fire AoE will sort of fly out of those. It'll expand radially. Meaning that the radius of the circle just gets bigger, so guess what? You run away from it. It actually does a significant amount of damage, which isn't particularly nice. Now, of course, you can run away from it, but you can also jump over it, so whatever you feel comfortable with. If your internet isn't great, I don't recommend trying to jump, because there's a good chance you'll just end up being dead. In the Frost phase, you will fire off Frost Bolts. Guess what? You don't really care about them, they're not too scary. The next thing she does is Frozen Rain. This is just Blizzard, but it hurts a lot. And if you stand in it until you die, then you're just a bit silly, so don't stand in it, because it'll mean that you're not silly. Now, for the Arcane phase, she does Arcane Burst. This is basically just Arcane Blast. It hits everyone, and that's actually quite problematic for the healers, because at that stage, she's kind of buffed up, and she's doing like 30k damage a hit for it, which is sizable enough, given how Warlord's healing currently is on the beta. Now, she does this thing called Arcane Blossom, which is the main scary ability of the Arcane phase, but we've actually always killed her before she even got to that stage. What it does is it just fires a whole bunch of arcane missiles out from her in all directions, and you just need to not get caught in their path, which is fine. So overall, this is a really fun boss. I like how the mechanics change based on the school of magic that she's using, and it's simple, but I think it's a lot of fun, and it's very well designed. Okay, so the next boss is YALL. Now, YALL he's definitely the hardest boss here, but mainly it's because people don't really seem to be doing their job much with him. So first of all, I'll just talk about the ability that he does now. He does Colossal Blow. This just does like 80k in front of him and stuns him for, I think, 5 seconds. Of course, if you get caught in it, you'll also get stunned, and that's not a very good thing, so you don't want to get caught in it and get stunned. Over the course of the fight, he's going to spawn in a whole bunch of ads. So the first kind are Swift Sproutlings. Now, these do an ability called Tendon Rip. This basically is not nice. It stacks up, with each stack giving you decreased movement speed by 5%, and it also deals 4,000 damage every second per stack. It just hurts. These guys need to die extremely fast, but they don't have much health. The next kind of ad is the Vicious Mandragora. This is easy enough actually. Basically it just does like a gas breath thingy. It's just a little cone in front of it, don't stand in it, very simple. There's then the Gnarled Ancient. This will do another frontal cone to anyone in front of them that does 60,000 damage all at once, meaning that it's not very nice. The other thing that this boss does is Genesis. Now this is where I had problems, because players just didn't follow this mechanic for some reason, which was unfortunate because, well, it meant we didn't get the kill, at least in one of the attempts. So the boss creates these like sproutling thingies on the floor, and you'll see them in the video. Basically, you just want to run over them and then it kills them. Now, 15 seconds after they're summoned in, if they're still there, i.e. they have not been walked over, then they will turn into feral lashers. Now, these lashers will spit venom at people for about 13,000 damage, and that's, they're not a lot on their own, but they really do add up, and that's bad for your group. Really, a lot of this fight's about dealing with, not standing in his cone, and then just dealing with the ads well. So there's one other thing in this fight. There's a whole bunch of Kirin Tor ads, and like Battle Mage people. They'll just fire off various, like magic spells, which is fine, but the thing that he does with them is called Entanglement, basically traps them in vines, and you want to destroy those vines to free them. The reason why is because they actually do help out in the fight, so that's the thing you want to do. But overall, that's basically it for this dungeon. Overall, I've got to say it's a really fun dungeon, and a lot of fun doing it. It's well designed, the bosses are great, so yeah, it's another big thumbs up. As always with Warlords, there are not many dungeons, but the dungeons that are there so far have been very entertaining. Anyway, that's it for me, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.